Hello Facebook, hello Bristol Epilepsy, this is Sam Downie, reporting live from the Epilepsy Awareness Day Expo held at Disneyland in California. Tell me who you are.
Hi, I'm Robert Yao, and I am the co-founder CEO of a company called EpiFinder. We're EpiFinder because we want to help everyone find their epiphany, or find the right doctor or healthcare practitioner that's able to help them the best and figure out their condition. So the way that this works is that we have an app called EpiFinder, and it's helping doctors right now at Mayo Clinic to assist them in collecting information to assess the patient for epilepsy. We have had a pilot study that we just completed, and it did really well. The results of that study are going to be published at the American Epilepsy Society conference that's going to be in December. And what we hope to do with that is we hope to use the ability of our app to improve diagnosis, to improve the lives of people who have epilepsy. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we've got this version that we're testing and that we're demoing here at the Epilepsy Awareness Day at Disney because a lot of patients come here who have epilepsy, and we want to make them aware that there is now something out there that could better help them to collect their information and fully tell their story. Because a lot of people are telling us that a lot of times the doctor doesn't have enough time to listen to everything that they've gone through. So one of the things that we did was we took patients that we were working with and told them, just completely tell your full story. And what we found was that when they sat down and told how they first learned that how they had their first seizure, how they first learned that they had a seizure, and how they had epilepsy, that it took a long time. It took more than 2 hours for them to fully tell their story. So after talking to patients, we realized that a lot of times that they were given the wrong diagnosis. So they would tell us what they were diagnosed with, and then we said, let's put that aside and just tell your story about the first time that you've had seizures and any other seizures that you've had since, what medications you've been on, how they've helped you or not helped you. And in order for them to fully go through that story, it took them about 2.5 hours. And so there's very little time that doctors have to actually go through that full process and listen to that full story. So what we did is we talked to a lot of the doctors. We created the app originally for doctors, and we observed all the questions that they asked, and we asked them, what is it that you're really looking for? And then we talked to patients and had them tell their full story, and then figured out how to kind of direct the story a little bit better so that we gave them things to fully think about. And what they told us is, when they were answering some of the questions, they kept saying, well, wow, I didn't really think of that. And so by giving them these prompts and giving them the app at the comfort of their own home, they're a little bit more relaxed, they'll be able to remember more, and then they'll be able to also talk to their family members or anybody who was with them, who witnessed the seizure, to actually get more of the information of what exactly happened. So their family members can take all the time that they need to answer all the questions on the app. So the way that it works is we have the app here, and you can log in. And so you can hit entry, and so then it starts asking questions like, did you have an unexplained event or a spell? And for this purpose of this, we'll say yes. What was the date of that? So if you click on this, down in here, there's dates available they can choose, right? What were you doing when the spell started? They can type the answers in here, and it will fill the box. You could fill the box to type in the answer. Also, we will have a choice list of choices that are available here. This is just information to fill it right now. Also, was there any triggers? So we'll have a list of all the different triggers that are here. So once they complete and answer these, we want to know whether or not they've had auras, right? Whether or not they've had auras. Okay. And so let's say that they did. then most people who we've talked to have said that they had visual changes, right? So we have all of the list of different types of visual changes that they have, whether were flashes of light or spots or sparks or flickering light that they saw, right? And then we want to know how long did that aura last. Next, we want to know whether or not they remembered anything from that. Most people don't. And so because they don't, somebody else had to be there to witness it. So there's a space there to let them know that somebody else is recording this and who they were. So the next question would be, well, if that person was there and they tried talking to you, were you responsive? Well, no, not really. And so next is to know what exactly happened during the seizure. And the way that we do it is we want to know what happened, what body part that it happened in, and what side of your body was affected in. Was it both sides? Was it left? Was it right? And that gives us a lot of information about some of the next questions to ask and how to follow up. Right? So what this does is in the back end, it actually collects the information and has an idea of what the diagnosis should be. But what we're doing is you just submit that, and what this allows us to do is to direct you to the doctor who may be the best doctor to make that diagnosis for you. Right? So in this particular section where all of these questions are, maybe you don't understand what exactly we're asking. So we have this little button down in here, and what it does is it's a messenger that goes directly to our team. So we have some silly sort of pictures here, but essentially this is a messenger that if you have any questions for us, you click on that button, you send us a message saying, I'm confused about this, or this is great, I wish it looked a little bit more a different way, or ask the question in a different way. You have direct access to us at any point in time to give us that feedback, right? So once that's done, it is submitted, and it's sent to, it's summarized and sent to a doctor who would be treating you. So the doctor, once you've filled out all the information is then summarized for the doctors, and the doctor can then log into the doctor version of the app and have all the information readily available to him or her. So I'm going to log in now to the doctor version. And essentially what you have is you have a section here where you can, where a doctor can register a new patient, or they have patients that are already on file because you've filled out some of the patient questionnaires, and then they click on this, and for the doctor it works like an electronic health record, right? So for the purpose of the demo, we'll click on this, and there's different dates that someone had maybe a seizure event that they've reported. And so here is a list of all of the different things that have been filled out, as well as what are the diagnoses to consider, right? So let's say, for instance, a couple days ago, somebody had all of these features in their diagnosis, and our app was able to identify that it's most likely something known as childhood absence epilepsy. Right? So the doctor, seeing this, can go with a diagnosis, or they can perform their own sort of assessment. So when they do their own assessment, they can click on this, and the clinical section works like a history and physical, where the doctor takes your medical history. So he can take your clinical history, your medical history, all of this, and then there's all of the different menus that they can go through and select to identify, different symptoms that are reported. So, for instance, there's different tone and movement signs, for instance, that they go through. These are all sort of medical terms and jargon that they use, and then so they can fill that out. So typically what happens is somebody comes in with their child. So I can type that in. They have a child that is, let's say, a little boy. That the parents are complaining that they are kind of daydreaming or staring off into space, right? So we start typing that in, and it auto-completes. It finds those sorts of terms for the doctor. Usually they have a funny blink, so then we have that in there as well. And the doctor wants to know, were they responsive? Like when you were kind of when you kind of tap them, did they respond to you? And so they can start typing stuff like that in. They want to know whether they're responsive or not, or whether or not they were aware of what was going on, right? And then they want to know their what's known as the developmental history. So here is a list of the developmental history right there. They want to know if the developmental history was normal or abnormal, right? So we'll click normal here, right? And then they want to know whether or not there's a family history involved. Also, a lot of people have asked us if we have any genes that are associated with epilepsy on the list. And we do. We have several genes that have been found in the literature to be associated with different epilepsy syndromes. And we're working on expanding that list. So I can say yes, there was a family involvement. May or may not have a specific gene known about it, but at least we know that there's a family involvement, right? So as all of this is filled out, I'm entering all the information in here, and what happens is it summarizes it all right there, and you'll see that when I hit submit, are we sure we want to submit? Sure. This is how quickly it comes up with a list of diagnoses to consider, right? So on the top two, it's trying to figure out whether it believes it's one particular syndrome or epilepsy. And so one of the things that we can see here is that a lot of the symptoms can be in both, right? We just need to further distinguish what is it that distinguishes between the two of them. So what we do is we'll hit on this little button called related terms. And so while the doctor is doing other things in terms of the while the doctor is doing the physical exam or trying to figure out other things on the chart, this is taking the information that has been inputted so far and then figures out, based on what's on the list, what is the next questions that they should be asking in order to figure out the diagnosis. So if, let's say, for instance, we click on this clinical piece, this asks the doctor to check for these particular symptoms. And based on the type of symptom that they check on, it could be a different type of epilepsy. So let's say, for instance, for instance, this is a list of all the other symptoms that they should check for in the order of importance that will help them to differentiate the diagnosis. Right? So, for instance, different symptoms that they're checking for let them know that there's a particular epilepsy that's associated with it. So, for instance, in here and in here, if there's a feeling of falling in space, that's usually parietal. In here, they want to know whether or not it happens right around sleep time. So this is the particular epilepsy that's associated with that, right? So the other thing too is that it's used in the epilepsy monitoring, and EEG technicians have the ability to, it gives them the patterns on EEG that they should be looking for given a particular diagnosis. So let's say, for instance, as you can see here, it's recommending that an EEG be done. And then if you click on, let's say this, 3 hertz, 3 hertz stands for this 3 hertz spike waves, it tells you what that's associated with, right? So each of these has a different epilepsy that may or may not be associated with all the different patterns that are there, right? So these are known patterns on the EEG that's associated with these particular epilepsy syndromes. And so for this particular one, we'll say, that the EEG technician will look for the pattern, and if they find one, they'll select it. So in this particular case, they've selected the 3 hertz spike waves, right? So when that's selected, they then can they see it on their list and they submit that again. and because it's characteristic of childhood absence epilepsy. Now, childhood absence epilepsy is a little higher on that list in terms of the diagnosis, as you can see. Okay, so it's a work in progress. It's done quite well so far. And what we need in order to make it better is to have more people using it, more people inputting their data in it. You will help push us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.